Welcome to today's deep dive. I'm your host, and I'm sitting here with our resident space expert.
Hey everyone, really glad to be here.
So we're talking about this crazy new era of human spaceflight today. And to those of you listening, if you want to understand the modern space race, you actually shouldn't look at the physics.
Right, yeah, the physics hasn't really changed.
Exactly. You need to look at the accounting. Because for like 60 years, the story of human spaceflight was effectively stuck in a museum. We were operating under an economic model that was, frankly, just insane.
It really was.
I mean, imagine buying a Boeing 747 jumbo jet, flying it across the ocean exactly once, and then just throwing it into the sea.
It is absolute madness when you frame it that way. You build this staggering multi-million-dollar masterpiece of precision engineering, over the course of years, and then you fire its engines for maybe 10 minutes.
Right.
And then you just let it burn up in the atmosphere or, sink to the bottom of the ocean.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today is to take an honest, really unhurried tour of where space travel is actually heading. We want to strip away the jargon so anyone without a science background can understand it.
Yeah, that's so important right now.
We are separating the genuine, exciting reality from the glossy, premature hype you see everywhere. And to do that, we kind of have to start with that old baseline.
Right, the way we used to do things.
Yeah. For most of the space age, spaceflight was this incredibly narrow script. You had highly trained government astronauts, staggeringly expensive single-use rockets, and we were confined mostly to low Earth orbit.
Let us define low Earth orbit for a moment, just to establish our geography for everyone listening.
Sure, yeah.
We are talking about the region just a few hundred kilometers above the surface of the planet. It's where the International Space Station circles the Earth. And keeping humans alive up there for over 2 decades is a profound achievement, but
But functionally, it's just skimming the very edge of the atmosphere. It's like stepping out onto your front porch. But because we were throwing away the vehicle every single time we went to the porch, the cost of putting even a single kilogram of cargo into space was astronomically high.
no one could afford to go any further.
Right.
So the transition we are seeing today, this sudden massive explosion of space news and all these rocket launches, it didn't come from a magical new fuel or some sudden leap in propulsion physics.
It was an accounting fix.
Exactly. It came from solving that specific accounting problem.
Yeah.
It all comes down to a deceptively boring word, which is reusability.
Reusability. So instead of a one-shot object, the main stages of these modern rockets, like the massive towering cylinders that house all the most expensive engines and complex plumbing, they're now designed to fly back.
Yeah, they do their job pushing the payload up through the thickest part of the atmosphere. They detach, and then they physically turn around.
Which still blows my mind every time I see a video of it.
Oh, it looks like sci-fi. They reignite their engines, and they land themselves upright on a concrete pad or, a drone ship out in the ocean. Right. What's fascinating here is the ripple effect of that economic shift. When you can inspect a rocket, refuel it, and just launch it again a few weeks later, the cost of putting mass into orbit just plummets.
And when the cost drops, the barrier to entry basically vanishes.
It completely changes the ecosystem. I mean, for decades, human spaceflight was almost exclusively the domain of massive national governments. They designed the vehicles, built them, operated them.
But now, because it's so much cheaper, private companies are the ones building and operating the vehicles. The government agencies are acting much more like customers now.
Right. They're essentially hailing a taxi instead of building a custom car in their own garage.
And this commercial pressure has driven like a really ruthless kind of innovation, right?
Absolutely. Companies are competing for contracts,
Yeah.
which accelerates the whole pace of development. But it also opens the door to completely new and sometimes pretty controversial markets.
Like space tourism. Yeah, we have all seen the headlines of wealthy tourists taking these brief suborbital trips just to float in zero gravity for a few minutes. And I think it's totally fair for you, listening right now, to view that with some mixed feelings.
It's a complicated issue for sure.
Right, because it's an undeniable engineering marvel that commercial space tourism is even possible. But it brings up totally new questions about safety standards and, well, accountability.
Yeah, a billionaire taking a highly publicized joyride is very different from the grand exploratory purpose that space travel is typically sold on.
Right, it feels a bit disconnected from the whole expanding human horizons thing.
Tourism is definitely an offshoot of this new, cheaper access to space, but it is not the core mission of humanity expanding into the cosmos.
So if commercial pressure has solved the cost of getting into orbit, The next barrier to deep space is weight. To go further than low Earth orbit, we kind of have to stop carrying all our fuel with us.
We have to learn to live off the land.
Right, and that dictates exactly where we have to go next. The nearest big target is the moon, obviously. But the stated aim of current programs is entirely different from the Apollo missions, isn't it?
Very different. Apollo was a geopolitical sprint. The whole goal was to prove a capability, plant a flag, collect some rocks, and get home safely.
And beat the Soviets.
Right, exactly. But the modern architecture is designed around permanence. The goal is to return, and this time, to stay.
But if you want to stay on a barren rock, you can't just set up camp anywhere. You have to be incredibly strategic.
You do.
So the primary target for these upcoming missions is the lunar South Pole, and why there? It comes down to this concept called in situ resource utilization.
Which is a very dry, technical way of saying living off the land.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So at the lunar South Pole, there are these really deep craters where the angle of the sun means the crater floors have been in permanent freezing shadow for billions of years.
And trapped inside those dark craters is water ice.
Water, which in the context of space exploration is basically the single most valuable resource imaginable.
It really is.
I've heard it called the ultimate space currency, but I have to play the skeptic here for a second.
Go for it.
I understand that if you have ice, you can melt it for drinkable water, but people talk about this water as rocket propellant. Wait, water puts out fires. How do you turn ice at the bottom of a frozen crater into rocket fuel?
That's a great question. You use a process called electrolysis.
Okay.
If you have solar panels set up on the crater rim, where there is near constant sunlight, you can use that electricity to shock the water. That electrical current splits the H2O molecule into its base components.
Which are liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen.
Precisely.
And those are the exact two propellants used in a lot of high-performance rocket engines.
They are. You burn the hydrogen and oxygen together, they combust with tremendous force, and the exhaust byproduct is just water vapor.
That's wild.
It is. And this is crucial because of something physicists call the tyranny of the rocket equation.
Oh, I always see that term thrown around. Break that down for someone listening who has never taken a physics class.
Sure. Think about packing your car for a cross-country road trip. Imagine if there were no gas stations anywhere on the route.
Okay, so I have to bring all my own gas.
Right. You'd have to carry all the gasoline for the entire trip in your trunk. But gas is heavy. So now your car is incredibly heavy, which means you need a bigger engine to move it.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah, that bigger engine burns more gas, so you have to pack even more gas, which makes the car even heavier, requiring an even bigger engine.
It's a vicious compounding cycle.
Exactly. Every pound of payload you want to take to the moon requires massive amounts of fuel just to lift it off the launch pad on Earth.
And that is why finding water on the moon is such a game changer. Shipping every single drop of water, every breath of air, and every tank of return fuel from Earth it would bankrupt any space agency.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But if you can mine the ice that is already sitting there in those craters, you suddenly have an oasis and a gas station in one. A permanent lunar base actually becomes a realistic proposition.
Right.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, though, we really need to inject a serious dose of reality here.
Okay, let's hear it.
The hardware for these lunar missions is physically being built. The metal is being cut. But space programs are enormously expensive and infinitely complex. When you hear bold announcements that humans will walk on the moon again by 2025 or 2026 or whatever the current target year happens to be,
You should treat those dates with extreme caution.
highly extreme caution. Historically, spaceflight schedules always slide to the right on the calendar.
They always get delayed.
Always. We are trying to invent systems that must operate flawlessly in a hard vacuum, with extreme temperature swings and lethal radiation. Delays are a feature of the engineering process. They aren't a bug.
So, if returning to the moon, which, by the way, is only 3 days away, is facing immense delays and budget hurdles, that brings us to the destination that generates the absolute most breathless hype.
Mars.
Mars.
Mars captures the public imagination like nothing else.
Yeah.
But this is where the public really needs to separate genuine engineering progress from pure salesmanship.
Right.
Going to Mars with a human crew is not just a longer moon mission. It's an entirely different category of difficult.
Let's look at the sheer, brutal reality of the orbital mechanics here. Like I said, the moon is a 3-day trip. When the oxygen tank exploded on Apollo 13, they were in a terrible situation, but they could essentially turn the ship around, coast around the moon, and limp back to Earth in a few days.
The entire rescue mission played out in less than a week.
Right. But Mars is entirely different. You can't just point a rocket at Mars and press launch whenever you feel like it.
Oh, Earth and Mars are orbiting the sun at different speeds. Think of them like two runners on a track. Earth is on the inside lane, moving faster. Mars is on the outside lane, moving slower.
So you basically have to wait for the Earth to catch up and pass Mars.
Exactly. The planets only align favorably for a trip, what physicists call a Hohmann transfer window, roughly every 26 months.
Wow, every 2 years.
Yeah. And when you launch, you aren't aiming at where Mars is. You are aiming at where Mars will be in 6 to 9 months, intercepting it on its orbital path.
Here's where it gets really interesting and honestly kind of terrifying. Because of that orbital dance, once you commit to a Mars mission, you are completely locked in.
There is no abort button.
Right. A crew is committed to a mission lasting well over a year, maybe up to 3 years, depending on the alignment. You are hundreds of millions of kilometers away. If a life support valve fails 6 months into the journey, there is zero possibility of Earth sending a rescue ship.
None. You have to be totally, uncompromisingly self-sufficient.
And during that multi-year journey, a whole series of biological nightmares basically begin to compound on the human body, right?
Oh, yes. Let's start with radiation. Down here on Earth, we are protected by a thick atmosphere and a powerful magnetic field that deflects incoming space weather.
We're in a nice little bubble.
Exactly. But the moment you leave Earth's protective bubble, astronauts are exposed to galactic cosmic rays and severe solar particle events.
It's like an invisible, relentless storm of high-energy particles just tearing through the ship.
It is. Those particles literally punch microscopic holes in human DNA. It significantly raises the risk of cancer, cognitive decline, and just general cellular destruction.
So why not just build thicker walls on the spaceship, like lead shields or something?
Because of the rocket equation we just talked about.
Oh, right, the weight.
Exactly. Trying to shield a spaceship against cosmic rays with heavy metals is like trying to build a submarine out of cast iron so it can fly.
That's a great analogy.
By the time the walls are thick enough to protect the crew from radiation, the ship is too impossibly heavy to launch off the Earth. We just do not yet have a practical, lightweight solution for long-duration radiation shielding.
And even if you solve the radiation, you still have to survive the environment inside the ship itself. Weightlessness.
Right.
We see videos of astronauts doing flips on the space station, catching floating droplets of water in their mouths. It looks incredibly fun. But the human body evolved under the constant downward pull of a 1G environment.
It did.
Yeah.
Without gravity, the human body essentially decides it no longer needs its structural support system.
Which sounds bad.
It is very bad. You see severe, rapid bone density loss. The skeleton starts dissolving its calcium into the bloodstream, and the muscles begin to waste away from lack of use.
But honestly, the craziest part to me is what happens to the fluids. I was reading about this fluid shift mechanism. Down here on Earth, our hearts have to work overtime, pumping blood uphill against gravity just to keep our brains oxygenated.
Yes, the cardiovascular system is fighting a constant battle against gravity.
Right.
In space, gravity is gone, but the heart doesn't know that. It keeps pumping blood toward the head with that same aggressive pressure.
So essentially you have fluid aggressively flooding the upper half of the body.
It raises the intracranial pressure. We've seen this on the space station. During standard 6-month deployments, astronauts develop vision problems because the fluid pressure literally pushes against the back of their eyeballs, flattening them.
Wait, flattening them? That's horrifying.
It really is, and we have studied this for 6 months.
Yeah.
But a 3-year round trip in zero gravity, that is completely uncharted, highly dangerous medical territory.
Okay, so let's assume a miracle. You survive the radiation, your bones haven't turned to chalk, your eyeballs are fine. You finally arrive at Mars.
Okay, you're there.
Now you actually have to land a massive habitat module full of people. And Mars has what engineers consider a profoundly awkward atmosphere.
Well, awkward is the perfect technical term for it, actually.
Really?
Yeah. Earth has a thick atmosphere. If you want to land a heavy capsule here, you use a heat shield to absorb the worst of the friction, and then you deploy massive parachutes to drift safely to the ground.
And the moon has absolutely no atmosphere, so parachutes are useless there. You just fire rocket engines to slow down all the way to the surface.
Right. But Mars is stuck in the middle. The atmosphere is about 1% as dense as Earth's.
So it's barely there.
Barely there. But it is just thick enough that if a spacecraft hits it going thousands of miles an hour, The friction will generate a terrifying envelope of superheated plasma that will melt the ship.
So you still need a heavy heat shield.
You need a massive heat shield.
Mm.
But once the heat shield does its job, that 1% atmosphere is far too thin to slow a heavy, crew-sized vehicle down to safe landing speeds using parachutes alone.
Oh, because there's not enough air to catch the chute.
Exactly. You hit terminal velocity much faster, and on Mars, that terminal velocity is a lethal crash speed.
So you cannot just float down.
You cannot. You have to transition from a hypersonic heat shield entry to parachutes, and then at the very last moment, ditch the parachutes, ignite massive rocket engines, and execute a powered descent to the dirt.
Which sounds incredibly complicated.
Doing that with a small robotic rover is an engineering miracle. Doing it with a multi-ton human habitat is a profound problem we have not yet solved.
When you add all of this up, the orbital lock-in, the radiation, the eyeball-crushing fluid shifts, the awkward atmospheric landing, the sheer terror of being millions of miles from a spare part, there is just this gaping chasm between we are building a rocket that can reach Mars and we will have a functioning human city on Mars.
There really is.
The confident predictions of Martian settlements popping up in a decade or two are, well, they're purely aspiration.
This raises an important question, though. Given the terrifying biological hurdles, the extreme costs, and the undeniable risks to human life, why are we trying to send fragile, squishy humans into deep space at all?
It is a debate that genuinely divides the scientific community.
Because there's an incredibly strong argument that we should only send robots. A robotic rover, like the Perseverance rover currently on Mars, is the ultimate low-maintenance explorer.
They don't eat, they don't sleep, and they don't complain about the food.
Exactly. A robot does not need breathable air. It does not need a massive water tank. It doesn't need complex temperature controls to stay at exactly 72 degrees.
Right.
And most importantly, it is a one-way trip. You do not need to pack the massive rocket fuel required to launch it back off the surface of Mars and bring it home.
That saves so much weight.
Unbelievable amounts of weight.
Yeah.
For pure scientific discovery, robots offer vastly more data per dollar spent, with absolute zero risk to human life.
So what does this all mean? If sending machines is so flawlessly logical, why does the human spaceflight program still receive so much funding and attention?
It's a great question.
I think the counter-argument is driven by intangibles.
Things you cannot easily measure on a spreadsheet or a budget report.
Right. There is a sincere belief held by some really brilliant people that humanity has a fundamental primal drive to go ourselves. Like, a rover taking a high-definition picture of a Martian sunset is scientifically valuable, sure.
But a human standing in the dust, looking through a visor and describing that sunset, that changes our perspective entirely.
Yes. There is the power of inspiration. A human footprint on another world fundamentally alters what the next generation believes is possible.
There are also highly practical arguments for the human struggle, too.
Like the spin-off tech.
Exactly. By forcing ourselves to invent systems that keep humans alive in incredibly hostile environments, things like advanced water purification systems, closed-loop life support, and highly efficient hydroponic agriculture, we develop vital technologies that spin off and help us survive on a changing Earth.
And finally, there is the long-term sci-fi argument. The idea that to ensure the long-term survival of the human species, we cannot keep all our eggs in one basket.
Right, the insurance policy.
Yeah, becoming a multiplanetary species acts as an insurance policy against a planetary catastrophe on Earth.
Both sides of this debate are completely valid. It really comes down to what you believe space exploration is fundamentally for. Is it a laboratory for scientific data? Or is it the next frontier for human expansion?
Which brings us to the ultimate takeaway for you listening today. The future of human spaceflight is in a more dynamic, chaotic, and exciting place than it has been since the 1960s.
The most useful stance for anyone watching this unfold is a kind of hopeful realism. We should be genuinely thrilled by what reusable rockets and private competition have unlocked.
It's amazing.
It is. The dropping cost of access to space is a true paradigm shift.
But we also need to be totally clear-eyed about the brutal biological and physical realities of deep space. When you see aggressive timelines attached to incredibly hard goals, keep the rocket equation and those fluid shifts in the back of your mind.
The frontier is opening, but it will open slowly, carefully, and expensively.
We hope this unhurried tour has given you a new lens for the next time you see a sensational headline about Mars. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over.
Okay.
We spend so much time talking about the physics of getting to Mars, but let's imagine we actually succeed. Imagine we establish a permanent human outpost on that freezing, irradiated desert. Think about what that day-to-day life actually looks like. Every breath of oxygen you take, every sip of recycled water, the warmth keeping your blood from freezing. It is all entirely dependent on perfect machinery operating without failure.
It is an existence completely enclosed in a fragile artificial machine.
So the question is, how will living in that environment, where stepping outside for a walk without a pressure suit means instant violent death, fundamentally change human psychology?
That's a terrifying thought.
If you are born in a machine, entirely dependent on a machine for your next breath, how does that change what it means to be human?
That might be the most profound, unknown frontier of all.
Thank you for spending your time with us today and exploring the brilliant, delicate future out there in the dark.